Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. I'm Shannon and thank you for joining us on the most important 15 minutes of your day, where we share expert information on safety and preparedness that you can use in your everyday life. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's making you uncomfortable? Maybe they're in your personal space, being argumentative, or even flirting with you. Of course, we all have. The important question is, what did you do about it? We've all heard about the importance of setting boundaries. What often gets missed is the importance of enforcing our boundaries. Depending on the situation and the relationship you have with the person pushing your boundaries, your response can vary significantly. So today, Kelly Sayer, founder and president of the Diamond Arrow Group, and my friend, joins us, and we're going to discuss the importance of boundaries, all the different types of boundaries, and how to practice enforcing them. So thank you for joining me again, Kelly.
Yes, thank you for having me. This is so much fun. Glad we can continue the conversation.
Yes. So last time we had a conversation, we had a lot of great responses, a lot of really wonderful questions on people wanting to dive deeper into, protecting ourselves. Like we're now going into boundaries. Mm-hmm. So can you kind of dive in and explain to us, how do we set our boundaries?
Right. And I think that just kind of as a recap, we'll be talking about setting, enforcing, and then considering the relationship that boundary pusher has with you, because it does impact how your response. Yes. And keeping in mind as well, this is all things that you could probably find. I mean, this is not something I just came up with on my own. So it's kind of putting it all together from things I've learned and sharing. So I'll be referencing where I got some of the materials from.
Perfect.
Setting boundaries. Okay. Setting boundaries. It's really easy for us to say, oh, I would never let, somebody get too close to me, or I would never, let someone who I didn't want to talk to force me to talk to them.
Right.
But here's the thing, when we get in those situations, if we haven't thought about, well, what would I say, or what would I do, or what do I consider a boundary? Because a lot of times we think of a physical boundary, our personal bubble. Right. Some people are okay if people are getting closer to them because of the situation. Maybe they're riding, on a train or a subway. And again, right now, I'm just taking out the context of the pandemic.
Right.
Because that always will have a factor, but sitting down and figuring out where you're comfortable, what you're comfortable with, that's important to do before you find yourself in the situation, because you don't want to all of a sudden, am I okay with this? Am I not okay with this? Right. And again, you mentioned, okay, there's different types of boundaries, right? The physical boundaries, the mental boundaries. What are you okay with people saying to you? Depending on, for me, I grew up in a very sarcastic, witty family. So somebody on the outside might think we're being very mean to each other, right. But really it's kind of part of how we were raised, is there's a little bit biting humor, right. And that's okay. And I'm comfortable with that because I'm going to give it right back.
Right.
And what am I mentally okay with people making fun of or poking fun at me? And also, when you think about it, another mental boundary, so to speak, is my time. I can decide I need, and especially right now, self-care is so important. I need these 5 minutes to myself every morning to meditate. And 5 minutes doesn't seem like a long time, but it's just enough for me to get through. So I can expect the boundary of my 5 minutes alone to be respected by my family. It's like, right. Nope, when my door's closed, you respect that boundary. If someone's like, well, I really need you to, hey, let's have a morning coffee. Okay, well, no, that's during my time. I can do it, at quarter after, because I need my 5 minutes first. So that's a boundary. And I've decided
on try to set that boundary with my kids. Like, hello, the bathroom door is closed. Please. And they don't do it.
Yes. And so I love having that discussion on boundaries, because when people realize, okay, it's not just physical boundary with a stranger.
Right.
There's so many boundaries that we have to consider, and it's important to get those set, and enforcing. So now we talk about, okay, no, the door's shut.
Right.
No, lock it. Like, don't assume that those people are going to realize just because the door's shut, they can't come in.
Right.
But enforcing boundaries might say, again, after the fact, sometimes people say, oh, I always think of a good comeback
Oh,
way after the event is over.
story of my life, right?
Yes. Or, you'll hear or see trainings where they talk about, the no with their hand up,
Yeah.
get back, step back. Okay, that works in a certain context.
Right.
But if this is like a friend in your social circle, excuse me.
Right.
So let's say it's your neighborhood, you've all known each other, and it's not someone you're close to, but again, it's that kind of fringe friend that's there. Well, you're not going to start yelling at them if they get too close in that setting because, that's not quite called for. Right. It almost seems like I'm overreacting, and then people are going to look at me like, what are you doing?
Right.
So I mentioned that I grew up in a very sarcastic family. So I use humor a lot of times to do the first kind of step of setting a boundary, of enforcing a boundary. Mm-hmm. If someone's standing too close to me and maybe they're not even aware, maybe they're distracted looking at their phone, they don't realize how close they're standing. Right. I might say something to the effect of, hey, I know my perfume smells good, but I don't want your nose hairs to burn off. You might want to take a step. Because again, it sets that tone of like, hey, I'm just giving you a heads up. You're standing a little too close. Right. But it's not accusatory. It's not getting angry and all of a sudden, whoa, why are you reacting that way? Right. It gives them an opportunity to show, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize, I wasn't paying attention, and brush it off. No big deal. And that's one thing where you might be able to say it once. And if they had no ill intent, they're going to, oh, I'm sorry. If someone's following you in a parking garage and you're getting nervous, you could turn around and say, hey, can I help you with something? And if they're not truly following you, they parks next to you, so they're walking the same direction. They're going to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. My car's right there. Right. So again, someone with no intent is going to feel bad that they made you uncomfortable. Someone with ill intent is going to continue to push those boundaries to test you. So the enforcing of that boundary, that, there's a couple steps. Okay. In a more of a social setting again. So maybe typically someone you're going to know, and whether or not they have good intent or not, but you can ask, polite, making a request. Hey, you're standing a little too close. Please back up. Right. They don't pay attention. Then you tell, please back up. You're making me uncomfortable. Tell again, but with more of a kind of stating the consequence. I asked you to back up because I'm uncomfortable. And if you don't back up, I'm going to leave. And then the consequence. Okay. They still aren't heeding your boundary, then you need to leave. And that's so key with the setting on the consequence, is you actually have to do it. It's just like with kids, if we threaten
the hardest part,
grounding, you have to be able to follow through with whatever you say you're going to do. And that's up to each individual.
What if we're in a situation though, like say we're at the store, and so there's someone that's just, being a sticky booger, right? And just on purpose sticking with you. After you do those, 3 commands, is it, if you can't get away, like, is that when we start to use our, loud voice? Or is it, what would you say in that kind of situation?
Right. And again, that kind of comes down to the difference between social violence, someone we know, or a social boundary pusher, and a more of an asocial boundary pusher. Something like that, where it's more of a stranger situation. Mm-hmm. Tell them right away, you're making me uncomfortable. Please back up. Still not doing it, still staying in your space. Tell them again. No, I asked you to back up. You need to back up. And then declare, okay, you're not backing up. So I'm going to go to the store manager. And then again, taking action, going to the store manager. These are all examples. Again, it's going to depend on what situation it is, but understanding that if someone's crossing your boundary, that you have to verbally state your boundary, they've already pushed past the socially acceptable boundary. So whether they know it or they don't know it, if you have to declare a boundary because really we all have a very nonverbal, if somebody's getting too close to us, we all kind of look at them like, what are they doing? Do they realize? Right. So our nonverbals are already communicating like, something's up, you're making me uncomfortable, I'm more aware of you. Right. And again, a lot of this comes from my 500 Rising training that I took, is having to consider that role. We talked about the different, are they a stranger? Is it a loved one? because you're going to treat a stranger at the store very different than creepy Uncle Joe.
Right. Right. And
So if it's a family member that constantly makes you uncomfortable, you don't always have the choice to, I'm never seeing you again, because guess what? When it comes time to the holidays, which we're all around now, you might not have control over the guest list.
right.
But you need to then be able to verbally state your boundaries. You need to have very direct communication with that creepy relative and tell them what makes you uncomfortable. And to your point, how loud you say it is to garner attention, because somebody who is more of that asocial, they're looking at you for potentially a sexual assault situation. They don't want attention. They do not want people to know that they're doing something that makes you uncomfortable.
Right. Causing that conflict is, a lot of times we're afraid to cause that conflict. And like what we talked about last month was paying attention to what you're feeling, right? Like that, okay, I'm uncomfortable. What do I do here? Instead of being afraid to offend someone or to kind of, get their attention or do anything, we need to stand up for ourselves.
Right. It's not rude to have boundaries. Because women in general will say, well, I didn't want to seem rude. I didn't want to seem judgmental. I didn't want them to think I wasn't a kind person, a nice person. Right. And again, you're putting it on yourself. It has nothing to do with you, and there's nothing you should feel bad about. It's their disrespect for your boundaries says more about them than you. And you need to remember that, whether it is a stranger or somebody that you know really well, a family or close friend, that says more about them. And the more that you set your boundaries and enforce them and decide ahead of time, so you're better prepared, so you're not like, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. If you're thinking through those scenarios, kind of that mental game plan, you're going to be more prepared in that moment, and you're going to say it calm, and you're going to say it direct, and stick to it. Don't feel like you have to say, if you could please back up, if it's all right with you. No, this is your boundary.
Right, because you're giving them control if you say it that way.
Right, because then if they say, no, I'm good here.
Right.
Now what do you say?
Okay, thank you.
Right, that wasn't what you were supposed to say. That's not what my script. You were supposed to do this.
Well, and that's so true. Like when Troy and I do our training, I think it goes back to anything in life. You need a plan. Like even you talk about comedians when they're giving, their jokes, they still have a plan.
Yes.
Yes. Troy and I talk about when you're in a venue, you need to look at your exits and you need to have a plan. This is all about forward thinking, providing that those tools for yourself so that you're, like you said, ready instead of later on, oh, I should have done this, or, oh, what have I done? Yeah.
And it may still happen, because this is a work in progress, right? This is a journey of learning to be more situationally aware, learning more how to enforce boundaries. So don't beat yourself up too much. Don't feel, I hope the listeners don't think, oh, I have to go down and I have to write all of these plans out, a huge, thick document.
Yes.
Is try and keep it as simple as possible, because then you're going to remember it, and it's going to be more likely to be easily deployed in that situation. We can only manage so much information at once. So if you just said, if I'm going to practice setting my boundary,
right,
and if they don't respect my boundary, then I'm going to walk away. If it's that simple. And then if they start following me, then I'm going to get assistance.
And I think that's perfect. And so right there, Kelly and I are going to have to end, even though we could speak forever. Next month, we're actually going to come together and talk about boundary testing. So we're going to take this. So this month, your job is to figure out how to set your boundaries. And then from there, we're going to move on deeper. So thank you, Kelly, for being here. I love talking with you. We could talk forever. And next week, Officer Bill Hume is back by popular demand, and he's going to discuss with me the myths and the facts about CBD oils and how to use them. So I wish you all and your loved ones a very Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. And thank you so much for listening today on Passionate World Talk Radio. You've just been listening to the most important 15 minutes of your day with me, Shannon Zeman. Remember, with knowledge, You have the power.